All right, so welcome back to Corona Lockdown. Last time we got our base coats done on these wee boys, and you might have been a little bit underwhelmed by the end result, but that's all right. It's the next two steps that are really gonna make these boys pop. So the first one, which we're gonna do today, is washes, and this is gonna fill in all those recesses and really get some contrast on that metal, which is gonna go a long way to making them feel like proper freaking Astartes. So there's not much point banging on about it. We may as well just get started. All right, so to start off, we're gonna get our wet palette ready by throwing the top part away. It's also looking pretty full, so I'm gonna switch that baking paper out for some more stuff. It's also looking a little dry, so I'm gonna add some water and just kind of swirl it around. Then once that's done, switch my water out for some fresh new stuff. I'm just gonna squeeze that paper in there so it's nice and tight around the edges and then mop up any excess water with a bit of TP. Sorted. At this point, we've also used this watercolor paper quite a bit, so I'm gonna rip it out and switch it for a new one. This is just because if you start to use this paper quite a lot and it gets wet and dry and wet and dry, bits of the paper and adhesive will flake off and get into your brushes and onto your paint, and that's just garbage. And then just grabbing our boy by the base, I'm gonna attach him to the painting handle and we're pretty much ready to go. So since last time we have progressed a little bit with our Hellblaster squad, as you can see the rest of the boys have been base coated, and I've also changed that red cable to more of a hazard stripe kind of look. I think this does help to kind of ground the boys in reality a little bit. So there's only really three types, or I guess ideas or intentions behind washing. That's actually total bullshit. There's a bunch. There's shades and tints and inks and glazing and so many different things you can do. But for the sake of a beginner's guide, we're only really gonna stick to three. So for our first method, we're going to be using Nuln Oil, and as always, we want to give it a real good shake. It's super important with these washes that we do this, otherwise you're going to end up with a really glossy finish. And I'm going to be using my medium brush again, just because it does hold a lot. We're going to be using a fair bit, so I'm going to be pretty generous with how much I'm putting on the palette. And again, I'm just going to give it a bit of a mix in there as well. You'll also see we're doing that little twisting method with the brush again, just to keep it sharp. It's not super important for this, but it is just a good habit to get into, because it's going to keep your brush tip for longer. So the first method or idea we're going to do is one that I like to colloquially call just drench the boy. I'm going to start off with the bits around his power pack, as well as the little sensor spine, the cable running along to the black parts of the gun, the trim of the shoulder pad that shows he's a weapon expert, his helmet, and then just around the barrel as well. You want to be pretty generous with how you're applying this, and you are going to see almost instantly the difference it's going to make. The reason that we're using this brush here as opposed to the other one is there are a few wee bits around the boy like here where we do want to be careful. Let it pull up in spots, and this is because we want this bit to look kind of greasy and used, so there would be kind of bigger, thicker chunks of oil or whatever here. So if it looked clean, it actually wouldn't look right. You can see I've got quite a lot on the brush there, and I'm really just letting it kind of fart around on there. I'm also going to put a little pop into those bits there. That's actually too much. So if you ever do that and put too much on there, you can always just get any excess off your brush and then let it kind of osmose back into those bristles. And I'm being pretty indiscriminate, like that bit's blue, that bit's green. I don't give a shit. I'm just giving it all a bit of Nuln. Nuln oil is quite often and quite accurately, I think, referred to as talent in a bottle, because it literally just gives everything definition and makes it look a million times better, like straight away. I mean, already, yeah, there's no real like secret to using this stuff. It just kind of does the job for you. It's pretty great. I'm just gonna get a big fat chunk of it on my brush and sploosh it into this backpack area as well, and really just let it fire around there and do whatever it wants to, just to give it a bit of texture. You can see a bit's gone over there, so I've just wiped my brush off and suck it away. The old finger on thumb there into this backpack area here, and just let that fill out so it's nice and dark. Same on the other side. Again, just letting that brush do the work for me, just sticking it past and then running it through. Now when it comes to more like detailed bits like this wee circle here, you want to be kind of careful. Again, kind of like how we did with the eye in the last episode. Just poke your brush tip in and then swoosh it around and let it kind of do the work for you. And then I'm just going to stroke, get a bit more and just kind of onto that top bit so that it gets a bit of dimensionality as well. I'm actually going to put a little bit of null on the black stripes of this cable as well. Although there isn't a line there, I do want to define the point where the black meets the yellow with a little bit of a highlight. And rather than actually painting in that highlight and risking getting an uneven finish, I'm just going to shade the pieces that wouldn't be a part of that highlight. Now at this point, things are going to be looking so good that you might be tempted to just do this over the entire model, but I'm really going to ask you not to do that, because although it's looking good on these nice little detailed pieces, as soon as we start going onto those large armor panels, you're going to get pools in places where there shouldn't be, and it's going to get murky and muddy. So we're going to hold off on that and move on to our next method now. So this time we're going to be working on or with some Agrax Earthshade, and again we want to give it a real good bust up just to make sure it's all nicely mixed in there, so we're not going to get a glossy finish. I'm going to load up my palette with quite a bit and just make sure every time I dip back in, I'm going to give it another little mix up with my brush and then pull it back with that wee spin to make sure we've got a nice tip, because we are going to have to be pretty accurate with this one. So again, this is going to be method 2, and we're going to just call it stay inside the lines, I guess. So we're going to start off with this shoulder pad here, and we're literally just going to trace every single time that a panel intersects with another panel. We're just going to trace a line of Agrax along that little bit of detail. So here along the bottom of the trim, back up to the top. And then you can see here there's these little bullet marks that we've got, and I'm actually going to paint the internal side, but also a little bit on the exterior so you can see where those raised edges are, and just cut that line in. Again, another wee scratch here. Just being quite careful and not too strong. We don't want to like fill those lines up. Now we're using Agrax for this because A, it's a closer match to the color of the power armor that our weeman is wearing, but also because it has like a dirty, dusty, kind of grimy feel to it. If you wanted it to feel sharper, then you could go ahead and use null oil for this as well. But I think for these boys being in the desert, like dust and grime and oil is going to be everywhere, so we're going with that kind of darker brown tint. So the reason that we're outlining rather than washing the whole area for this one is because we kind of like to imagine power armor is quite like a hard, tough substance. So if we were just to wash it all and give it really soft edges, it wouldn't feel crisp, it would feel sort of soft and malleable. So the sharper and more consistent, I guess, and pinpoint you can get these lines to be, the harder and tougher and more solid that power armor is going to feel. I'm also going to do the seals here as well and just let that really flood into all those little recesses, because they are going to feel dusty and clogged and filled with crap. So there's not really a whole lot to this method. This is all it really is, just going along and outlining every single piece of everything on this model. It's going to take some time and we're going to have to be patient, but if you do muck up, you can always go back and do a tidy up round, which is definitely something that I'm going to have to do a little bit later on. Now there are a few wee tricky points on these Space Marines that might be worth going over. A good example is the seal underneath his helmet there. We don't want to skip this because it does actually give a lot of depth and realism to our boy, but it's going to be hard to get to because we haven't done this guy as a sub-assembly. Really what I'm going to do is just get that brush with a real good thick layer, and similar to how we do the backpack, just kind of jam it in there and swish it around and just let it kind of fill. The wash is going to want to naturally kind of osmose itself into a crack because it is quite runny, so you can kind of use gravity to your advantage as well and just let it seep into those little bits. That way it's kind of doing all the work for you. It's magic sauce, man. It's crazy. Now you might remember here around the backpack, we actually already did this line with some null oil, but because we're doing the armor now and we want to color that shadow with that kind of brown coat as well, we do want to go over it again with Agrax. This is a good rule of thumb for everything. Like if you're shading this color, you want to shade everywhere this color is. So even where it joins a piece that you've already done. That said, for the Hellblasters, I'm going to purposely not put any shade around where the white hot plasma coils and stuff are, because we're going to do something different with them a little bit later on. I'm also going to go a little outline around the edge of where the vents meet the backpack here. It's not a super strong line in the model, but we do want to show the fact that there is a bit of a shadow there. And then just like we did with the null oil, I'm also going to shade the yellow parts of this cable again, so they kind of have like a false edge highlight that separates the black from the yellow. Bit of a stronger contrast. I said contrast there. Shit, we're getting in trouble. So now it's just a matter of being patient and going over the whole model and getting those lines as sharp and as crisp as we can. Once we're done, I might even go back over with a bit of that base color and just tidy things up to make sure that all those lines are crisp and sharp and tasty. So with all that tidied up, we're going to move on to our next method, for which we're going to be using Raglan Flesh Shade. Now I guess we could just call this method coloring in? Yeah. So these leather pieces we've already gone over with Agrax, and we did a pretty hefty job on it. So the idea here is less about building contrast on the model and more about kind of layering colors. And because leather comes from animal skin, we're using that kind of fleshy, reddier tint. So you notice here the way I'm applying it is very directional. That's because basically wherever the end point of your stroke is where the wash is going to be thickest. So I'm using that knowledge to make sure that the edges are where the highest concentration of the red is. Especially here you can see me pulling it up to make sure that it's a really strong red where those two flat planes intersect. Then once I've done all those leather pieces, I'm also going to go ahead and put a little bit on the red cables and then on his little laser pointer. So once that's done, I'm just going to quickly go over with a bit of Drakenhof Nightshade, which is kind of a dark bluey, purpley kind of wash. We're just going to go over all the little coils and vents in the plasma gun for this. Yeah, it's the same stuff we've done before. We just want to make sure that we're getting into all those grooves. The only thing worth really pointing out is that I'm also going to get a big fat drop and just kind of slosh it around on the inside of that barrel to make sure we're tinting the whites that we painted in there earlier. And with that, all the washes on our wee boy are done. You can see the final result here. He's really starting to get a lot more depth, and you can see what a huge difference this has made. And as soon as we put those highlights on, he's really gonna look like a big time bad boy badass. So with the highlights coming up next, he is starting to progress pretty quickly, and he's gonna be looking real spick real soon, so do hang out. If you got any other tips or comments you wanna share, throw down below. Otherwise, we'll see you soon.